What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of El Autobús de Lucha, where sometimes learning is a struggle, but here it doesn't have to be. My name is Leo. This is a show where we break down audio clips and news articles from Spanish to English, and we break them down, understand the context behind them, and enhance our understanding of the Spanish language. Today, we're going to be reading an article, a couple articles, about the protests in Mexico that happened a couple weeks ago. We're going to be understanding what sparked it, and we're going to be understanding why it went on and what was the result of that. This article comes from France24.com, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it today. Una generación cansada y frustrada por los niveles de violencia en México. El sábado 15 de noviembre, miles de personas protestaron en varias ciudades de ese país, siguiendo el llamamiento del Movimiento del Sombrero y de la generación Z, menores de 28 años. So with this one, we can already go ahead and start. Una generación cansada y frustrada por los niveles de la violencia en México. A generation cansada y frustrada. Cansada here is tired. And frustrada is frustrated. And frustrated por los niveles de violencia en México. By the level of violence in Mexico. El sábado 15 de noviembre, Saturday, 15 de noviembre, that's 15 of November, Saturday, November 15th. Miles de personas protestaron. Miles is a number, it's thousands of people protested in varias ciudades de ese país. Protestaron en varias ciudades de este país. We're going to go ahead and say Saturday, November 15th, comma, thousands of people protested in various cities in that country. Following the call, siguiendo el llamamiento, following the call of Movimiento del Sombrero. And in this one, we're going to go ahead and keep it the same, but for the call of Movimiento del Sombrero, which here it's slash the hat movement, or the hat movement, and the Generation Z. So let's go ahead and, Movimiento. A generation tired and frustrated by the level of violence in Mexico. That's probably the title of the article. Saturday, November 15th, thousands of people protested in various cities in that country following the call of Movimiento del Sombrero, or in this case, the Hat Movement, and Generation Z. I'm going to go ahead and delete the because that doesn't really make sense here. And it says menores de 28 años. So right here, they're specifying who Generation Z is. People under 28 years old. And here we already got a couple numbers here, right? So we have November 15th, which is 15 de noviembre. So we had to switch that around a little bit. And then we have another number, which is miles de personas. Miles de personas is thousands of people. So in this case, the number is going to be miles. You don't really have a specific number tied to it. Like, you don't have like 1,247 people. It's just thousands of people gathered to protest in this country. And we also have another number down here, which is 28, which in this case, the way you would pronounce that, if you wanted to say I'm 28, you would say 28. But in this case, people under 28 years old, menores de 28 años. Go ahead and free up some space here, and we are going to have our translation right here. Uno de los más recientes acontecimientos violentos fue el asesinato por disparos del alcalde de Uruapan, Carlos Manso, durante una celebración del Día de los Muertos. Se hacía llamar El Sombrero y era conocido por su lucha en contra del crimen organizado. So let's go ahead and break that down because that's quite a mouthful, right? Uno de los más recientes acontecimientos. One of the most recent acontecimientos is an event. One of the most recent violent events was the, I'm going to go ahead and put an asterisk on this. Yeah, you can't really tell. Hopefully YouTube doesn't flag that one for that. Was the deletion, I guess you can say for lack of better words, so I don't get flagged, por disparos del alcalde de Uruapan. Stop right there. Was the deletion of the alcalde, assassination by shots, by shots or gunshots or gunfire of del alcalde de Uruapan, the mayor of Uruapan. Uruapan is a city in Michoacán. Carlos Manso. Durante una celebración del Día de los Muertos. Durante is during, and then this one we're going to switch it around a little bit. Durante una celebración del Día de los Muertos. During Día de los Muertos celebration. And obviously, Día de los Muertos is Day of the Dead. Se hacía llamar el sombrero. He called himself el sombrero. He called himself el sombrero y era conocido por su lucha en contra del crimen organizado. He called himself el sombrero and he was known for his fight against organized crime. So we're going to go ahead and read those two paragraphs back. Una generación cansada y frustrada por los niveles de violencia en México. That was the title. El sábado 15 de noviembre, miles de personas protestaron en varias ciudades de ese país siguiendo el llamamiento del Movimiento del Sombrero y de la Generación Z, menores de 28 años. Uno de los más recientes acontecimientos violentos fue el asesinato por disparos del alcalde de Uruapan, Carlos Manso. Durante una celebración de Día de los Muertos, se hacía llamar El Sombrero y era conocido por su lucha contra el crimen organizado. So you can go ahead and see those two paragraphs right there. I'm going to go ahead and summarize that. I'm going to go ahead and read that back in English. The title is A Generation Tired and Frustrated by the Level of Violence in Mexico. Saturday, November 15th, thousands of people protest in various cities in that country following the call of Movimiento del Sombrero, the Hat Movement, and Generation Z, people under 28 years old. One of the most recent violent events was the deletion by gunshots or / gunfire of the mayor of Uruapan, Carlos Manso, during the Dia de los Muertos celebration. He called himself El Sombrero, and he was known for his fight against organized crime. Hopefully it's making sense here a little bit. We're going to ask some questions here at the very end. Moving on to the third sentence probably. En la capital, muchos de los manifestantes portaban sombreros, símbolo del fallecido Carlos Manso, y pancartas con mensajes como Todos somos Carlos Manso. Let's break that down. En la capital, in the capital. So this is where they were in the capital. Muchos de los manifestantes portaban sombreros. Many of the protesters portaban, sported, or wore sombreros, hats. And these aren't just like regular baseball hats. These are like, there's like cowboy hats, like the big round one, like the 10-gallon hats, 5-gallon hats, and stuff like that, as a symbol, which when in this case, símbolo del fallecido Carlos Manso, a symbol of the fallen or deceased Carlos Manso. Y pancartas con mensajes como todos somos Carlos Manso. Now, we all know what mensajes is. It's a message, right? But what is a pancarta? Pancarta is a banner, so those long banners or signs or something like that. But they held up banners, and banners with messages like, and then we're going to go ahead and quote, todos somos Carlos Manso. We are all Carlos Manso. Oops. We're all Carlos Manso. So in the capital, many of the protesters sported or wore hats, a symbol of the fallen deceased Carlos Manso, and banners with messages like "We are all Carlos Manso." So it's getting to paint a clearer picture here of why people are starting to gather. People are starting to gather because of the deletion of the mayor of Uruapan during a celebration of Dia de los Muertos. This sparked an outrage in people, and I can give you a little bit more context a little bit later, but this sparked an outrage in people enough to where they gathered in various cities, not only in the capital of Mexico, but they gathered in various cities saying, this is unfair, we want change. Moving on. Los manifestantes se reunieron alrededor del Palacio Nacional en la Plaza del Zócalo, donde vive la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum. The protesters se reunieron, united or reunited or gathered. I guess that's a better word for it. Gathered alrededor, around. The National Palace. In the Plaza del Zócalo. In the Zócalo Plaza. In the Zócalo Plaza. ¿Dónde vive la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum? Where the president Claudia Sheinbaum lives. Ahí la protesta se volvió violenta. That's where the protest turned violent. So now we're starting to put the pieces together. In the capital, many of the protesters sported or wore hats that was a symbol of the fallen or deceased Carlos Manso, and banners that said, with messages that said, "We are all Carlos Manso." And so the people who were closer to the National Palace, they gathered right around there, where the president Claudia Sheinbaum lives, and that's where the protest turned a little bit violent, took a little bit turn for the worst. Moving on. Algunos manifestantes derribaron las vallas de contención. Let's stop right there because that is rough, right? This is some level 3 type. Reading and comprehension. Some of the protesters derribaron. They took down, they shut down, they brought down. Or knocked down. We're going to put knocked down las vallas de contención. So at this point, we're just calling them barriers. Y tiraron piedras a los policías and threw rocks at the police. Quienes usaron extintores, whom used this. In this case, we're going to use whom used extinguishers and granadas. Now, what's a granada? Grenade. They didn't use real grenades, but they used, let's read forward a little bit. Y granadas de gases lacrimógenos contra los protestantes. Now, we're learning new words here. Granadas de gases lacrimógenos. So we're using tear gas grenades, whom used extinguishers and tear gas. And for the sake of literacy here, we're going to put grenades. Against the protesters. Incluso les arrojaron objetos, including them throwing objects. They also, in this case, for the sake of reading comprehension, they also threw objects. So now we know, going all the way to the top, one of those most violent events was the death of a mayor in Michoacan, and people were really upset. They called for a protest, and because he was known for fighting organized crime, people are really upset. In the capital, many protesters wore hats, wore those cowboy hats and symbol of the deceased Carlos Manso, and banners with messages saying, "We are all Carlos Manso," like we can all be next, right? The protesters gathered around the National Palace in the Zocalo Plaza, where the president Claudia Sheinbaum lives. That's where the protests turned violent. Some of the protesters knocked down barriers and threw rocks at the police, which the police used fire extinguishers and tear gas grenades against the protesters. They also threw objects, right? And a lot of people were pissed off, and excuse my language, but a lot of people were pretty upset because since the police were protecting the National Palace, people are. This is a quote that some of the protesters yelled out. We're going to get into it. Así hubieras protegido a Carlos Manso. Así, which is that's how you should have protected Carlos Manso. Gritaron algunos de los participantes a las fuerzas del orden. Gritaron algunos de los participantes. That's how you should have protected Carlos Manso. Yelled some of the participants. A las fuerzas del orden. This one is just fuerzas del orden is just the law enforcement. Yelled some of the participants to the law enforcement. All right, so let's go back up and go ahead and decipher this a little bit. Title is Generation Tired and Frustrated by the Level of Violence in Mexico. Saturday, November 15th, thousands of... Well, you know what? Let's go ahead and read the whole article, paragraph by paragraph, and then we'll go ahead and read it in English. El sábado 15 de noviembre, miles de personas protestaron en varias ciudades de ese país, siguiendo el llamamiento del Movimiento del Sombrero y de la generación Z, menores de 28 años. Uno de los más recientes acontecimientos violentos fue el asesinato por disparos del alcalde de Uruapan, Carlos Manso, durante una celebración del Día de los Muertos. Se hacía llamar El Sombrero y era conocido por su lucha en contra del crimen organizado. En la capital, muchos de los manifestantes portaban sombreros, símbolo del fallecido Carlos Manso, y pancartas con mensajes como "Todos somos Carlos Manso". Los manifestantes se reunieron alrededor del Palacio Nacional, en la Plaza del Zócalo, donde vive la presidenta Claudia Sheinbaum. Ahí la protesta se volvió violenta. Algunos manifestantes derribaron las vallas de contención y tiraron piedras a los policías, quienes usaron extintores y granadas de gases lacrimógenos, that one's a hard one, contra los protestantes. Incluso les arrojaron objetos. Así hubieras protegido a Carlos Manso, gritaron algunos de los participantes a las fuerzas del orden. Now we're going to go ahead and read it in English. Saturday, November 15th, thousands of people protested in various cities in that country following the call of Movimiento del Sombrero, the Hat Movement, and Generation Z, people under 28 years old. One of the most recent violent events was the deletion by gunshots or gunfire of the mayor of Uruapan, Carlos Manso, during a Día de los Muertos celebration. He called himself El Sombrero, and he was known for his fight against organized crime. In the capital, many of the protesters sported or wore hats, a symbol of the fallen deceased Carlos Manso, and banners with messages like, "We're all Carlos Manso." The protesters gathered around the National Palace in the Zocalo Plaza, where President Claudia Sheinbaum lives. That's where the protests turned violent. Some of the protesters knocked down barriers and threw rocks at the police, whom used extinguishers and tear gas grenades against the protesters. They also threw objects. That's how you should have protected Carlos Manso, yelled some of the participants of the law enforcement. Now, we have one question here for sake of reading comprehension, right? So what was the motivation behind the protest? And we have four options here. A, political unfairness. B, Carlos Manso's death. C, taxes are too high. Or D, because Generation Z is soft. So I'll give you a couple seconds there to read and let that simmer in there for you. While I let you simmer behind that, let's go ahead and recap basically what's been going on. So there's a bunch of protests because of that, and they started protesting right where Claudia Sheinbaum lives. They gathered around the palace, and they're like, "This isn't fair. Like we should be treated fairly." And a lot of people yelled out, "That's how you should have protected Carlos Manso," because of the way that she was being protected. There was a lot of other things that were being yelled. If you want to go ahead on YouTube and read some of those things, they were yelling insults at the president. There was one video of somebody calling her an ARCO president. Spell that so YouTube won't flag me. But let's go back to the question. What was the motivation behind the protest? The main thing that really sparked everything and the motivation was definitely not because Generation Z is soft. Taxes are the taxes are too high is not the reason. And political unfairness kind of can be tied into that. But the main reason was Carlos Manso's death. Now, I've been reading a bit about this, and it was because of the fact that Carlos, and now this is me telling you what I've been reading, what I've been understanding. The death of Carlos Manso, which is, Carlos Manso was a mayor in the city of Michoacan. That sparked a lot of outrage because people were upset that he was killed or deleted, in a celebration of Day of the Dead. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, politicians die in Mexico all the time. They get shot down, they get kidnapped, they get, like, what's so different about this one? Well, the reason why this one is so different is because he was one of the ones that was so adamant about going against organized crime. Now, the president didn't like that. Now, there's speculation that the president did not like that. The president of Mexico did not like that. And she might have been behind the deletion or the act. I am not saying she was. I'm just saying what the speculation is. So people are pretty pissed off about this because they're saying, well, how come somebody who's against organized crime and somebody who's against corruption, how come he gets clapped and everybody else is fine? And honestly, I watched a press conference with the president that she does every morning. I watched a lot of those. And they asked her about the protest and the motivation behind them and stuff like that. And the only thing that she really had to say was, listen, there was a protest, people were around, and it was about Generation Z. There was supposed to be a lot of young people, but what I saw from the videos was that there was a lot of older people there. There wasn't a lot of young people, so I don't understand that. And I'm obviously paraphrasing here. But that's basically the gist of what she said. She kind of like justified it by saying, yeah, there was a protest, but there wasn't a lot of Gen Zers. There was mainly old people. And somebody even asked her in the press conference in front of everybody. It was televised. Well, it was televised, but it was on YouTube, on the live. And somebody asked her, there was like, hey, there was speak of people from your cabinet inciting violence in the protests. And she's like, yeah, we could talk about that a later time. I am not for her. I am just reiterating what I have learned and what I have read and what I've seen from her press conferences. She doesn't really want to talk about this, and she doesn't really want to reevaluate what's going on. Yeah, it's kind of a shit show down there, and hopefully, hopefully this helped you kind of understand a little bit better of what's going on in the protests in Mexico. Again, I am not for or against her. I am just a guy who's reading articles and would think that this is relevant to what's going on in the world, and I think it'd be good deal petit material, because this could pop up on some sort of language test. Let's do one more, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. Actually, we're just going to go ahead and cap it off here. I think that was enough. So hopefully you understood. Hopefully you were able to enhance your understanding of the Spanish language. Hopefully this reading comprehension helped you out quite a bit. If you have any questions about this, I would definitely just look it up on YouTube. But if you have anything that you'd like me to break down or cover, let me know. Send me an article, and I could definitely break it down for you, and we can both learn together. Learning all this was actually pretty interesting for me. But I like to be able to do the translations and all that kind of stuff. That's going to be it for me, and we'll catch you on the next episode of El Autobús de Lucha, where learning something new is sometimes a struggle, but here it does not have to be. We'll see you next time.